Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir and joining me as always is Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It is Season 1, Episode 23 in Austin. The Pittsburgh Steelers have prevailed over the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Divisional Round of the playoffs by a score of 18-16 and have moved on to the AFC Championship game to take on the New England Patriots. Austin, you and I got to watch it together. How special was it to see the Steelers pull it off in probably unspectacular fashion, but nonetheless win this game?
That 8-yard catch by Antonio Brown was probably the best catch I've ever seen, and it was nothing special. It was just an 8-yard catch, or it might have been 7. I might be even off by a yard.
Well,
it was still one of the most spectacular catches I could say I saw.
Well, I can definitely it definitely drew some parallels for me to the 2011 AFC Championship game between the Steelers and Jets on a very similar situation and play. The Steelers looking to convert on a third down that would put them in position to take knees and end the game for a chance to go to the Super Bowl, and it's Ben Roethlisberger rolling to his right, finding Antonio Brown in the exact same kind of situation. So let's back up a little bit and talk about the game itself. So, just a brief little overview of the game. The Steelers started with the ball in this game, and they went right down the field pretty quickly on, I think, 11 plays. Had to settle short for a field goal that kind of set the tone for the way the offense was going to perform all day. They kicked. They had a little squib kick on the ensuing kickoff to try to take Tyreek Hill out of the game. That didn't work well. The Chiefs had a really short field. I think it was like a 55-yard drive. And they scored right away. I don't even think they had a third down on that drive. They took the lead 7-3. From that point on, the game kind of changed. The Steelers kind of controlled the game on both sides of the ball. Offensively, they moved the ball down the field several times, mostly through Le'Veon Bell, who was probably the biggest offensive star of the game, and he was the biggest offensive star of the game with 170 yards, setting another team record for rushing yards in a game in the postseason. Which is, I think, 3 more than what he had last week. So he broke his own record. He broke his own record, which he set last week. That's crazy. So the Steelers were moving the ball with ease, but they were struggling to convert once they passed the Chiefs' 30-yard line. They didn't really get much closer. They kicked 4 straight field goals for 12 unanswered points to go ahead, 15-7. Then in the fourth quarter, the teams traded field goals, and the Chiefs eventually took over and scored on a 13-play touchdown drive, which would be their last of the game, which was aided by a Sean Davis penalty near the goal line. However, on the 2-point conversion attempt, a completed pass in the end zone was called back for a holding penalty on Eric Fisher, and the next try fell incomplete. The Steelers got the ball back and converted on a key third down, which you were talking about, the pass to Antonio Brown that allowed them to run out the clock. And the Steelers just barely hang on to move on to the AFC Championship in Foxborough next weekend. Austin, the first thing everyone was talking about when I was listening to the radio shows the next morning, excluding the Antonio Brown thing, was everything that was going on with Travis Kelce and the Eric Fisher holding call on the 2-point conversion attempt. Travis Kelce made it clear on his thoughts and opinions regarding the matter. What do you think about the call of holding and Kelce's reaction to it, Austin?
Well, to start on something that we'll tie back in a second, I always pick on the refs for their no calls. We agreed during the game that when Cockrell jumped into Kelce earlier in the game, that was PI that had not been called. And Karma righted himself later when Cockrell got called on a pass interference that shouldn't have been a pass interference. Anyhow, that's slightly off topic. It was just to justify that I pick on the refs for all situations. I think they're rather bad, and I believe that this was not a bad call. He didn't get to see the replay yet, and it is what it is. It's just time for him to move on. He's probably seen it now. He's probably like, he seems like the type of person to, even when they're wrong, to stick to their guns, but he probably realizes he's wrong by now. But what do you think?
Well, after thinking about it and hearing a lot of people talk about it, I do understand Kelce's frustration, given the fact that it was right after a game where their season ended, and right after what I guess he probably thought it wasn't a hold, and when you have all that going for you, all of a sudden for it to go the other way, it probably does shock you a little bit. But at the same time, he has he really needs to think a little more about what he's saying, considering he already has a history of being a hothead kind of guy, considering he was thrown out of a game earlier this year. And really, he needs to look no further than the mirror to look at himself as far as the way he played in this game. He could have played much better and probably could have his performance could have had a lot more to do with the Chiefs winning instead of losing. He had at least 2 drops. I think he might have had 3. He had a huge unnecessary roughness penalty against Ross Cockrell in the second half of that game. And I think he'll look back on this in maybe a year or 2 or a few years, and maybe even sooner than that, and I think he'll look at what he said as a mistake, something that he probably thought was true in the heat of the moment, and maybe he still think will be true, but something I think he'll wish he had handled differently. And as far as the call goes, I can see why the Chiefs may have thought that shouldn't have been holding given the situation. We've seen plays like that not be called holding before, but as an offensive lineman, when you get your arm around the neck of an outside rusher who's in a lane to get to the quarterback, usually that doesn't end well. I think by the book, that's a textbook holding call, even if it isn't always called. I think in that kind of situation, it's harder not to throw the flag than throw the flag on that kind of situation. So the other thing that everyone's been talking about, and we just it's 11:30 Eastern time here. We just saw Antonio Brown's written apology, or I guess typed apology on Twitter. So I'll let you touch on that in a second here because I didn't read it, but. It's been a little over 48 hours, and I'm sick to death of this story. So basically, for those who don't know, I'm sure you do, but if you don't, after the game in the locker room, Antonio Brown is streaming a live Facebook video on his account of what's going on in the locker room. And, he's just kind of screwing around, just looking around with his teammates and stuff like that, and he's behind some lockers. What you hear in the background is you hear Mike Tomlin talking to his team, kind of addressing them like the coach does after a win and stuff like that, getting them pumped up, and he's telling them to sort of keep a low profile, which is incredibly ironic because Brown is streaming this on Facebook as he's saying it. And you have, I think it was Ramon Foster who said, stay off of social media this week. So it was really kind of a sobering thing to see that the Steelers have now dealt with internally, but I've heard so much talk about this over the last 2 days, and I'm already so sick of it. I think the media has completely blown this out of proportion. I will say this, Antonio Brown made a huge mistake, and it was really stupid of him to do this. Now that Mike Tomlin has made his statement, though, and Brown has issued his apology, I think the situation has been rectified in-house. The punishment, whatever it may be, will be served, and it will be a learning experience for everyone else in the locker room to not do something like that. Unfortunately, this, just like the Odell Beckham Jr. situation in Miami a couple weeks ago, I'm worried that should the Steelers lose, it's going to be pinned on something like that, when in reality, this is going to have nothing to do with the game on Sunday and how it's played. I don't think at all that the Patriots are going to use Mike Tomlin calling them a-holes as motivation, considering how common coaches say things like that to try to get their players pumped up, and the fact that really the Patriots shouldn't need any more motivation to play better than they already do. You're playing one game away from the Super Bowl. You shouldn't need more than that to get up for a game. Look, the point is, I think it's stupid. It shouldn't have happened, and it really better not happen again. I'm done with it. Please tell me what you think about this so we don't ever have to talk about this again, okay?
Honestly, I don't have much to say about it. Antonio made a stupid mistake that made Tomlin look bad. However, I do have a disagreement. I think this could have an effect on, the OBJ vote incident. As far as I know, we haven't been informed of what the punishment actually is. Quote me if I'm wrong, and if you know it, because I don't. And what could happen is he could be benched for a quarter or even a half as punishment. I don't know if that would happen.
That's not going to happen.
We saw it happen to Cam Newton for breaking the dress code earlier in the year. So, it's possible. And if that were to happen, I stick by Tomlin. It would be AB's fault. It would be stupid, but it would be AB's fault.
I don't think that's going to happen.
So I don't think so either. But just in case it does, I'd be pissed. Because I can't think, how else do you punish a player besides benching them? I can't think of one. What do you make him do?
I don't know.
Extra push-ups in practice, like in middle school and high school?
No.
I don't know.
You don't do that because it's these are grown men, not kids, I don't really know as far as like what they do, but there's definitely a stern reprimand. I don't know. Well, you see things like this happen to guys, and you think about. I mean, granted, this isn't the same thing as Santonio Holmes with the marijuana, or it's more similar to Mike Wallace and the money kind of things. But I mean, I think it's either a fine or some sort of who knows, maybe it's Brown doesn't get any social media privileges on game day. Maybe it's something like that. But
I think the NFL is following him separately, probably, because that was illegal to the NFL's rules.
That's true. It was. I don't know. I'm glad that we don't have to make that decision because that's not something I would ever want to. That doesn't interest me.
Oh, if Tomlin benches him, there's going to be a lot of pissed off people.
I don't think it's going to happen. Wow. I think he'd be crazy to do that because then you're putting that ahead of winning, which is as strange as it sounds. Like normally you'd want to set an example, try to make everyone equal, but the truth of the matter is not everyone is equal. Antonio Brown is Antonio Brown, but he has to get the idea that he can't be doing things like that. And I think, at least according to his statement, which I don't know if you have on you, but based on what I thought he said, I think he gets the idea. I hope. We'll see. I don't know. So, moving on to... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He just said he just apologized for his actions and behavior after Sunday's game. He said that the emotions got the best of him. And he recognized that it was against team and NFL policy. And he said he apologized to Coach Tomlin and his teammates. And he apologized one more time for becoming a distraction. And that's just the summary of what he wrote out.
Okay. Well, whatever. I'm done with this. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
All right. So now moving on to actual football-related news. We had a pair of record setters in the game on Sunday. First and foremost, we already mentioned Le'Veon Bell setting the Steelers' record for the second week in a row with 170 rushing yards. Chris Boswell set a new NFL record for field goals in a postseason game. He was the entire Steelers' offense as far as points go on Sunday, knocking in 6 field goals for the second time this year. It's really incredible to think that I heard a few stats. This is one that the Steelers were the first team to be a -2 in the touchdown department, meaning that the Chiefs scored 2 touchdowns more than the Steelers and still lose a game. So you can look at that as being incredibly lucky, or the Steelers defense played really well, or Chris Boswell played really well. I like to think of it as a little bit of all of those, but Chris Boswell was definitely, in my opinion, the MVP of this game, and Le'Veon Bell was definitely the best player on the offense. What did you think about their performances?
Le'Veon Bell was fantastic. He's really, really showed that it's been sad without him in the playoffs. He was making it known that the Steelers really should have had him in the past playoff games that he's had to miss. I mean, obviously, it wasn't the Steelers' fault or anyone. He tore his ACL last year, but he's just shown what he could be, what he can do when he's given the chance to be in playoff games. And he set the record for most yards in first 2 playoff games too. It was just such a weird record that it was really not worth mentioning. But he's put up so many yards in the past 2 games. Then with Boswell is just doing great. I see you have it down, but it's just Josh Scobie was our kicker last season, for part of it at least. And it's just like you think about all of the PATs he missed from under 40. It's just super bad. And Chris Boswell's here. It's nice to have someone that's reliable. He's not like the Justin Tucker or the Gostkowski or Adam Vinatieri where he's going to hit the super long 58 ones, but he's not going to miss the ones under 50 like he did this whole game. And it's really fantastic. I'm glad that he got to get a record, even though it's kind of a record that's sad because the Steelers shouldn't get a touchdown. But, I would still take it because it was a win.
Yeah, exactly. It came in a win, and you can't ask for much more. And really, I think all of them, maybe except for one, were right down the middle. There was one that may have been like on the left side, but I think he he knocked them all through pretty well, especially considering how the weather wasn't great there. It wasn't like raining the whole game, but it certainly wasn't week one conditions there. So definitely not the easiest thing to do. And neither is blocking Justin Houston, Austin.
No, not at all. Justin Houston was not even allowed a quarterback pressure in this game, and it's continuing to show how Marcus Gilbert is a Pro Bowl snub. Like, it's insane. Like, Marcus Gilbert, I was reading a tweet, has gone against some really hard people in the past 2 years. I know it's 2 years, so you can't really consider the last year, but he's gone against Von Miller, Khalil Mack, like some of the best in the league, and he's done really well against them. And he's complete Pro Bowl snub this year.
Von Miller twice.
You had a quick note.
Oh, yeah, but he won against Von Miller twice last year too. People forget about that too.
Right.
But yeah, really quickly, the outside pass rush that we had been worried about all week didn't really come to fruition. The Chiefs got 1 sack, and I think they only had a couple of quarterback pressures. Ben Roethlisberger was about as clean in the pocket as he could have been. D Ford and Jarvis Jenkins had the 1 sack for the Kansas City Chiefs. Like you mentioned, Justin Houston didn't have a pressure. Tom Bahali didn't really have any impact at all. The Chiefs really, Roethlisberger wasn't really rushed, like I was saying, and I think someone that I wanted to put the spotlight on really quickly is the other tackle on the offense, Alejandro Villanueva. Villanueva came in. We all know his story. The former Army Ranger turned lineman who used to be a tight end at Army. Spent the year on the practice squad a couple years ago. Then backup, then thrust into the starting lineup after a couple injuries, and he started most of last year, and he was okay last year. He had his ups and downs, and he had that the same way this year at the start. And then I think when the team started getting better, I noticed that Villanueva's been getting better. He's definitely not as good as Gilbert. He's not as athletic. He's not as strong. He's not the freak of nature that Marcus Gilbert is, but I think the gap that fans were pointing out between the two of them and how good they both were, it's not as large as people think anymore. Just watching the way he's been handling some good pass rushers and the way he's been blocking, particularly in the passing game. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a good run blocker too, but just watching the way he handles the blind side has been really good the last few weeks, and I just wanted to commend him for the way he's played. So Austin, moving on. I want you to tell me what your grades were for the offense. We'll go back and forth. I wanted to hear your grade on the offense and your thoughts, and I'll give my grade on the offense, and then we can move on to the defense and whatnot. What did you think about the Steelers' offensive performance?
All right. Their offense, I gave them a C+. It's basically all for the offensive line and Bell. The offensive line played fantastic. It's the offense's main component that brings the grade down. It's the quarterback. In my eyes, Ben had a really bad day. Stats don't say so, but he missed so many throws to wide open wide receivers. It was ridiculous. And but not all of the poor offensive play can be blamed on Ben. However, some of the offensive grade is impacted by the bad coaching decisions, like not calling a run with 1st and 5 from the goal line, which it still baffles me. I'd also like to say that Jesse James brought up the grade. Jesse James had a really good day, but how about you? What was your grade for the offense?
Well, I gave it a C. The Steelers finished with 389 total yards, and I don't care how much you move the ball, though. If you can't score touchdowns, you aren't going to win many games. The Steelers got lucky. They got bailed out by strong defensive and special teams play this week. If they didn't, we'd be talking about how these guys failed when it mattered most. You could talk about the 100-yard receiving performance from Antonio Brown. You could talk about the record-setting performance from Bell. You can talk about whatever you want, but it wouldn't matter if the Steelers didn't win this game. But they did, so we can talk about it as though it's still something that they did well, but something that they can definitely improve upon. So I thought a C was an appropriate grade for that. The offensive line was absolutely the star of this group, in my opinion. They were fantastic again. They allowed 1 sack on Roethlisberger, which was a coverage sack. He was rarely pressured, and Le'Veon Bell had plenty of room to operate. The passing game, as we said, was okay. Ben Roethlisberger connected with Brown several times. Jesse James had his best game as a pro. It was really nice to see him playing well. Eli Rogers had 5 catches, but he didn't do much on those 5 catches. as simple as it gets. This group couldn't score touchdowns, and when they got past the 30-yard line, they just got bogged down for whatever reason. And obviously, it goes without saying, but they can't repeat this performance next week. But amongst all the negativity I just mentioned here, they did move the ball very well, and we haven't seen that a lot, at times on the road this season, especially against a quality team like the Kansas City Chiefs. And they still led 6 scoring drives, maybe even 7 if the Steelers or if Ben Roethlisberger doesn't throw a tip pass that turns into an interception. Yeah, you'd like a lot more of those 6, potentially 7 scoring drives to be touchdowns, but at the same time, it's still good to know that they can get in position that many times, which means they aren't far off when it comes to scoring. And their passing game wasn't even at its best, as we said, and they easily won the time of possession battle. What'd you give the defense, Austin?
The defense, I gave a B+. This is probably a bad comparison, but I heard one of the announcers say it during the game, and I thought that it was great. This unit was playing like the Patriots under Belichick. Like, they shut down the main components, in this case, Kelsey and Tyreek Hill, and they try to make others step up in their place. Otherwise, the other team isn't going to do much, and that's how the Steelers played. They did fantastic with this. Tyreek Hill had less than 30 yards receiving, and Kelsey was a non-factor in the second and third quarters where he didn't record a single catch in that time frame. Most of the grade gets dragged down from the Chiefs' first drive, where it seemed like the defense was going to get run over all day. They really came back from that first drive and played hard. What did you give them?
I also gave them a B+. Aside from the first drive and the final 2 drives, they played really well. They finished with 2 takeaways, even though really one wasn't of their doing, and they only had 1 sack. But the Chiefs struggled to move the ball the entire day, and like you said, they kept the star players in check throughout the game. The number 1 star for their team is definitely Travis Kelce on offense. True, he did drop a couple of passes, but he still had a pretty solid performance, 5 catches for 77 yards normally, but they still kept him in check. You think about those catches that he made. He didn't really make them, at impactful times. Yeah, they were on he made a couple on scoring drives, but it didn't really feel like he had any game-breaking plays. And as you already mentioned, Tyreek Hill, I think I calculated he only finished with 45 yards on a total of 7 touches on offense. He was actually used more effectively as a decoy, I thought, which was kind of interesting. But going back to the defensive grade of a B+, the thing that kept them from an A was the fact that they gave up scores at inopportune times, specifically the last 2 drives and the early drive, the first one of the game. I don't really attribute the first scoring drive necessarily to the defense. I think you look at the fact that the Chiefs had the extra week off and extra preparation for their game plan, and also the fact that they had a really short field on that first drive. I think the defense really didn't have much of a chance. But then the rest of the game, they only gave up 9 points. And Alex Smith only averaged 5.1 yards per attempt. And aside from that long conversion, I can't remember if it was a 3rd and 16 or 3rd and 20. I can't remember the exact yardage. But I remember that long conversion to Jeremy Maclin. I think outside of that, they only had 1 or 2 explosive 20-yard passes. But even though they gave up a TD at the very end, they were able to hold up when it mattered most on that 2-point conversion, and they did a good job of getting pressure and keeping the running game from amounting to anything, and just keeping the Stars kind of settled down a little bit. So now, Austin, this was the one unit that we were all worried about. What'd you give the special teams?
Special teams got an A. It was a unit that shocked me this weekend. I expected a complete failure and fall apart from this squad for this weekend. And what did they go and do? They completely stopped Tyreek Hill and get 6 field goals. The returns weren't too bad either until the last drive return by Gilbert, who went backwards and nearly gave me an aneurysm. But good for them for really getting prepared this week. They deserve the A. What did you give them?
I also gave them an A. We're pretty consistent here on the grading here. There were only 2 things that kept this from being an A+ to me. The first is the squib kick that allowed the Chiefs to sort of be set up in good position for the first scoring drive, although I will give them credit for adjusting and deciding not to do that the rest of the game. The other one is, like you said, Justin Gilbert's heart attack-inducing decision to start running backwards on that last kickoff return. Outside of that, the special teams was brilliant. We were all worried about Tyreek Hill. All we could think about was, wow, how many times is he going to break one? Because we were so scared about how badly the Steelers' special teams performed in Miami, or I guess against Miami in Pittsburgh. But the Steelers shut him down. He had only, let me check this real quick. Hill had 4 kick returns for 72 yards. That's an average of 18 yards, a long of 21, and no punt returns. So I guess I should mention, Jordan Berry only had to punt once in this game. It was only a 35-yard punt, but it was important in the fact that he kicked it out of bounds to not allow Hill to make a return. So the coverage units were fantastic on this day, and as if it weren't enough of a bonus to have Chris Boswell kick 6 field goals for the second game this year in some bad conditions, the Steelers got some nice kick returns of their own. Justin Gilbert and Sammy Coates both had returns that went past the 25-yard line, I believe, and it was really special to watch. Yeah, a long of 28 for Gilbert and 24 for Sammy Coates. Man, it might as well have been a touchdown because we were shocked to see something like that. And this was a group that we did not expect to dominate, yet they did in just about every sense of imagination. Vince Williams with that huge statement hit on the kickoff with Tyreek Hill the first time they kicked it deep to him. I remember you and I were amazed about that, and all of a sudden Tyreek Hill was rendered human. And then, of course, as we heard all throughout the end of the broadcast, that you could add Chris Boswell to the list of killer bees with his incredible performance and record-setting performance with 6 field goals. It was fantastic. So, Austin, I'm guessing I know for a fact neither of us predicted 6 field goals from Chris Boswell, but can you tell us a little bit about how your predictions went for this game? Austin? Sorry about that. Had a technical malfunction here. Austin is back on the line. So, Austin, how did your predictions go for this game? I know we didn't predict Chris Boswell was going to kick 6 field goals this week.
No, we did not. So, I'll start off with the score just to get out of the way. I called the 24-23 score. I thought that was a little too off. That I thought both offenses would fare a little bit better. Apparently not. It wasn't even as close as I thought it would be. I mean, it felt like it anyway, but still. The one prediction I got right this week, Antonio Brown goes for 100 yards, but no touchdown. I actually got that right because he only got 108 yards and no touchdown. So I think within 8 yards was good enough for me. So I take that as a victory.
One thing, real quickly, what do you think about that last play before the half? Because that to me was just like, I don't really understand what was going on, but like that was almost like just a play to pad stats. You remember that?
Yes, yeah. It was the should have been Hail Mary that turned into a quick throw to Antonio Brown. I didn't know what to think of it. I guess it was trying. I wouldn't want to think they were just padding stats. I would have thought that they would have went for something that was trying to score.
I see what they were doing.
Oops, sorry. You go?
I was just saying, I sort of see what they were doing, getting the ball in the hands of their playmaker, but at the same time, I was waiting for him to lateral it to someone, and it never happened. So I was like, oh, I guess I really was kind of perplexed by that.
They should have definitely had someone in the area that they were going to do a lateral situation. But I don't know. I didn't like it. I thought it should have just been a straight up Hail Mary. At least take a shot at the end zone. But I don't know. But I'm going to keep going with the predictions. And my next one was that Le'Veon Bell gets 150 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns. I was rather close on the scrimmage yards as he had 166. But, of course, there were no touchdowns in the game, so still bad prediction. Then I called 4 sacks and 1.5 coming from Bud Dupree. Well, there was only 1 sack, and it came from James Harrison. So, rip, really bad there. And then finally I called the Tyreek Hill special teams touchdown, and he was shut down. And I was glad I was wrong. How were your predictions?
Well, I predicted that Spencer Ware was only going to get 50 yards, and the Chiefs were going to have to abandon the the ground game, and it's not that they had to abandon it, they just never had the ball. Spencer Ware only managed 35 yards, albeit on only 8 carries. I thought he was going to get more than that. He did score a touchdown. I predicted Smith was going to go 2-2 in the touchdown and interception department. He had 1-1 this time, but one of the interceptions did go to, or the interception went to Ryan Shazier, who I did predict was going to get an interception. Made a great play on a tipped ball while after making the catch, getting just walloped from behind and then in the front. It was amazing he held on to that. I predicted 3 sacks for Alex Smith. He was only sacked once, but I did predict James Harrison was going to get a sack. I thought both of Smith's touchdowns were going to go to Travis Kelce. Instead, his early and only touchdown went to Albert Wilson. I had been really hoping that Ben Roethlisberger was going to put together a complete performance on the road. Unfortunately, it never happened. Only managed 224 in the air, no touchdowns, 1 interception. Yet I disagree with you a little bit. I think he played a little bit better than his numbers suggest. Not great by any stretch of the imagination, but not poor. I think a few drops, including the one by Antonio Brown in the end zone that was really a great play by Marcus Peters, and one by Eli Rogers near the goal line, really hurt. But even though he didn't play great, he did play well when it mattered most, and that's all you can really ask for. And, just really quickly about Le'Veon Bell, you'd think about his performance in receptions the last couple weeks. You'd be concerned. The last 2 weeks, he has 4 catches for 3 yards. But at the same time, the Steelers haven't needed it. I predicted another 100-yard game on the ground for Le'Veon Bell, and he did me one better. He broke his own postseason rushing record that he set last week. He one-upped himself. And the funny part is 9 of those yards came in the fourth quarter. He easily could have gotten a lot more had the Chiefs' last drive not been 13 plays. He was fantastic again. He was dynamic, and he seems to be getting even more patient, if that seems possible. So I was on the money with another 100-yard performance. Didn't get it right. I thought he was going to get a touchdown, though. I predicted Antonio Brown was going to go 10 catches for 125 yards. He finished with 6 for 108. And as far as the final score goes, obviously there wasn't a touchdown for the Steelers. I had them winning 28-20, and they won by a score of 18-16, so it was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be, and a little bit more low scoring. So, Austin, real quickly here, it's so rare that a team struggles so much once they pass a team's 30 and 20-yard line. Obviously, moving the ball in that side of the field is a lot harder. But when you look back at all the Steelers' drives and how they stalled, can you kind of take us in depth here, kind of, I guess, take a closer look here, try to explain to both me and the audience why the Steelers failed time and time again when they crossed the 30-yard line? Would you say it's more of a coaching issue, an execution issue, just bad luck? And since I'm assuming it's a combination of all 3 of them, if you had to pick one, what would be the one that was most true?
All right, so I'm going to go drive by drive. I looked at every single one that where they got close and either had to take a field goal or they threw an interception. So let's start with the first drive. Right after a strong run for 8 yards by Le'Veon Bell, it was set up a 2nd and 2, 5 yards away from the goal line. The Steelers decided it would be the best play call to throw twice after Le'Veon plowed his way down the field. Both throws were unsuccessful, an incompletion first, and then a 1-yard gain that didn't get a first down. And I believe run should have been called on one of those, so I'm going to blame that on the coaches for that one. The next drive, I'm going to start out straight with what happened. It wasn't the coaches. Ben Roethlisberger makes 3 bad throws in a row. I watched every single one. I was just kind of appalled. On first down at Kansas City's 23, he throws behind Jesse James, who can't catch it, which honestly, Jesse James was in a bad spot anyway. It was a bad read to throw to him, so I wouldn't have expected him to come down with it anyway. It was thrown perfectly because he had a chief right in his face, but regardless, it was thrown behind him. On second, he throws a ball on a bad spot to Eli Rogers, where he was able to catch it for 3 yards, but Rogers had to work back to it. And if Roethlisberger placed it right, it could have been an 8-yard gain or more, because Rogers had to, instead of going upfield, had to come back down because he was about 5 yards out. And it was a bad throw. Then Roethlisberger finished it off by by throwing it too high for Antonio Brown, who was wide open on the sideline. So this was completely just bad play from Ben Roethlisberger. There was nothing else to be blamed on besides that. Next, this was actually one that wasn't listed. It wasn't a coaching issue. It wasn't an execution issue. I guess it could be attributed to bad luck, but I'm going to give it to a good Chiefs play. It started with Marcus Peters making an incredible play, ripping the ball out of Antonio Brown's hand before he hit the ground for a touchdown. And then when the Steelers finally decided to rush in the end zone, Eric Berry blows it up for a loss of a yard, and thankfully Le'Veon Bell wasn't hurt there because there was a picture on Twitter of it, and he had his ankle all twisted, and it didn't even bother him apparently, but still. Then the drive got finished by Ben trying to get the ball to Bell, who looked like he got held on the play but didn't get called for such. It was kind of arguable. I thought it was like a hold. Refs said it wasn't, so that was the third field goal of the game. Next up, first and goal. The goal line is 5 yards away, and the Steelers decide to throw it. It gets tipped at the line and picked by Eric Berry. It was a bad read by Roethlisberger anyway, as it looked like Antonio Brown was covered and it would have been picked, but that's a coach's problem. They should have called a run for 1st and 5. Le'Veon Bell was literally averaging more than 5 yards per run, so the chances were, on average, he was going to get those 5 yards or more, which he only needed 5, so just a really bad play.
Austin, I did hear, I don't know if, I guess you didn't hear this or see, but I heard that was actually, there was a chance that might have been a hot read by Ben Roethlisberger to, audible out from a run to a pass because he has a run-pass option on every play in the red zone from what I saw.
Ooh, so he audibled? I didn't see it. I must not paid enough attention. I just kind of looked around. So
it's possible. It's possible.
That was bad. Next up, the drive just gets halted. It starts with Bell trying to rush. He only gained a yard. And then next play, Ben throws to Bell behind the line of scrimmage, and Bell gets tackled for a loss of 3 yards. Then on 3rd and 12, Ben tries throwing to Rodgers, who gets taken down. And it's not pass interference because the ball got hit at the line, which caused another field goal. Yeah, it was just... I think that was bad luck. I mean, if the ball didn't get tipped at the line, it would have been easy pass interference. So I attribute that one to bad luck. Then the Hail Mary situation. 3 seconds before the end of the half, the Steelers decided it was best to try and let Brown make his way there instead of just throwing it up into the end zone. And Brown gets only to the 15-yard line and the half ends, so we already discussed this. It was an arguable play call. I'll blame it on the play calling, but I mean, there wasn't much chance of getting points there anyway. It would have been nice to at least take an end zone shot for a team that was struggling. I guess they didn't know how much they'd actually struggled in the red zone until the next half. But anyway, moving on. The next time, they just can't get anything to happen. Ben makes another bad throw with the closest person being over 3 yards away to start the drive. Then Bell rushes for only 1 yard as he gets wrapped up from behind and hit in the front. And finally, a screen to Bell losing the yard. It was just bad play calling. I attributed it to. I didn't like the screen to end it. It was just, no. I blame it on the play calling completely. Then the final one. We're on to the last one. I'm sorry for so much talking. It was really good on the Chiefs. First, they start by stopping Bell for only gaining 2 yards. Then Rodgers can't come down with a pass after the Chiefs. Steven Nelson just barely recovers from being beaten because Roethlisberger actually placed a really nice pass. It was a good pass. He saw that Steven Nelson got beaten at the line really bad, but Nelson made a great recovery. Rodgers should have had it still. It was still thrown in a nice spot, and Nelson wasn't fully there. But then Roethlisberger took a coverage sack because everything was covered up. I couldn't blame Ben Roethlisberger. As we watched, they showed right on the replay that how everyone was covered. There was no one open there. So they had to take another field goal. And that was it. That was every single time they got really over into the Chiefs side of the field in an attempt where they could make a field goal or do something.
Well, you really would have liked to see them score a couple touchdowns at least, but, it is what it is. So I'm going to move into this real quickly, try to get through this kind of quickly, just real quickly, I'm saying quickly too much. Who were a couple players that impressed you on offense and defense, and a couple players that disappointed you on offense and defense?
I will start with the impressive people. Offense was Jesse James. He had 5 catches for 83 yards, and it was arguably his best game. The reason why it's arguable is because the other game, his second best game, I believe, was 4 catches for 40-something yards, but he had a touchdown. So he obviously didn't have a touchdown in this game. No steal he did. So it's arguable. I like this. But I really liked what I saw from him. I didn't expect much at all from him, and maybe at the most he'd get 2 catches for 15 yards or so, but he had a good day. Then flipping to the defense, James Harrison continues to impress me. People should just expect me to pick him as I play to impress me every week because it just doesn't make sense that a 38-year-old is doing this. He literally got off the plane and went straight to the gym after the game. Like, who does that? He could be attributed to saving this game since he forced Eric Fisher to hold him on the play that called back the 2-point conversion. And he got the only sack of the day for Pittsburgh, so good on him. Who is the player to impress you on offense?
Well, I'm going with Marquise Pouncey and Bud Dupree on the offense and defense. I really wanted to go with Jesse James, but I figured it would be kind of redundant to talk about the same thing. He did play really well. But the guy I wanted to talk about is Marquise Pouncey. Le'Veon Bell's the obvious star on the offense, and he was a standout player, was Jesse James too. But Pouncey's a perennial Pro Bowler who stabilizes the offensive line with his play every week, and he led the group to another fantastic performance. Like we said, he kept Roethlisberger upright and protected all night, and he had helped lead all those open holes from Bell. But the one thing that stands out to me about him is the fact that he can do this so often, and that is to be asked to be pulled from his position. I don't know how much you know about pull blocking as an offensive lineman, Austin, but it's very difficult. It's not as easy as they make it look. Even if it doesn't look easy, it's really hard, especially when you have to worry about snapping the ball too. When I played, I could tell you that my greatest asset was how quick I got off the ball right off the snap. Getting those first couple of steps and hitting the defensive player right away, that can be a huge advantage towards how a play starts if you can get a leg up on the defender before they even realize what's going on. When you snap the ball, it kind of takes that away from you. So worrying about snapping the ball makes you a lot slower. And the fact that he can snap the ball effectively and he can pull as effectively as he does as a lead blocker, it's really impressive for me to see because I understand how difficult it is to do that. Yeah, it's not a pro level kind of thing. He's been doing it for a lot longer than I ever did. But at the same time, it's still something I marvel at. But Dupree on the other side, it's real nice to see him producing as a It was really nice to see him producing as a regular starter for the last few games of the season. It's been a whole other thing the last few weeks that we didn't expect to go from being injured to a recovering part-time player to starter and to an impact player. He's now a respected and strong force on the outside, both in the run and in the pass. We already knew about his ability to set the edge in the running game, but the last few weeks he's shown that he can get some consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks. He's got those strong moves, those bull rushes, those speed rushes to get past those tackles and to make quarterbacks fear him. And at the same time, he's taking some heat off of the bookend guy that you just mentioned, James Harrison. It's very exciting to see the way he's playing right now, especially considering he may only get better. On the other side, Austin, who are some players that disappointed you in this game?
So I'll start with offense and go with Big Ben. Ben, if he plays like that in New England, the game is over before it begins because New England knows how to put up points. They're not Kansas City where they don't really have the greatest offense in the world. And it's going to be a struggle. I really thought he would have a good road performance for once. It just didn't happen. I'm hoping for a better week next week. On the defensive side, it was actually a much harder pick because I didn't really have one. So I just kind of gave it to Freddie Burns. The one touchdown he gave up, he got really confused in the play, but still, he didn't have a bad performance, so to say. It was the worst out of a rather good situation. How about you? Who disappointed you?
Well, it was kind of hard to pick this week. I didn't want to pick Roethlisberger because I didn't think he was that. I didn't think he was horrible, and I also didn't want to go with the same thing as you. So I went with wide receivers not named Antonio Brown. Part of this is because of Ben Roethlisberger's play, but at the same time, the trio of DeMarcus Ayers, Kobe Hamilton, and Eli Rogers combined for 7 catches for just 37 yards. I was still hoping for a little more from these guys, particularly Ayers and Hamilton, who each finished with 1 catch apiece. Rogers had 5 of the 7, but dropped a key pass that would have put the Steelers on the doorstep for a touchdown. I really didn't see much from Hamilton and Ayers that it's not like they're bad or anything. We've seen them produce. I just want to see them produce a little more, and I guess it was okay this week, but I think we're going to need to see more from them if they want to win. The other side of the ball, this was really tough. Yes.
I'm sorry. Let's not forget about Darius Hayward-Bay not even showing up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I kind of grouped him with Sammy Coates for this week, just like, oh yeah, they're not even there. Did he have a target?
I don't believe so, but you can finish your segment and I'll look it up.
Okay. Well, I'll just move on then. Sean Davis was the guy, I guess, is the person that disappoints me. And it's not really that he disappoints me. It's just more like he's going to be the loser this week. Because not only did he get flagged for something that I mean, it's a good flag because by the book, it's that's the rule, and he was making a play that was by the book, an infraction of the rule. So it is tough when you see a player make a play like that because he's just trying to get the ball loose, and it's hard for him to play the ball. He can really only play the man there, but it is what it is, and he's going to be a loser this week because not only did he get flagged, but in all likelihood he's going to get fined too. But I also didn't see him that much, like buzzing around like I'm used to seeing him, but at the same time the unit played really well, so I'm not too concerned about it. So I guess I had to pick someone, so it was going to be him. Did you find Darius Hayward-Bay's targets for this game?
Yeah, he wasn't targeted once.
All right, well, I'll just throw him and Coates. Well, I'm not going to throw Coates in because he's not a part of the offense. So I guess maybe he's a little disappointing too. We'll have to see if he if he got any snaps because I don't remember seeing him. But anyways, is there anything else you wanted to add? Because there's just one last thing we had to get to.
No.
Okay. So the last thing here is that the Steelers ended up pretty good as far as the injury report goes. There weren't any major injuries. I saw that James Harrison may have been a little dinged up, but at the same time, this was the guy that was working out the following morning at 5 p.m., so it looks like he'll be fine. The same 4 guys who are questionable this week, Chickalow, Green, Matthews, and Golden, will all have their opportunities to play next week. Ladarius Green is reportedly still in concussion protocol, so obviously we're concerned about that, but the play of Jesse James this week really has me feeling good about his performance potentially going into next week. So we'll keep everyone updated as far as what's going on there, and we'll also be recording our preview show for the AFC Championship game later this week. We'll also do a quick recap of the other 3 divisional playoff games, and I think we'll do an NFC Championship preview too. I'll see if I can get my friend Will in contact again. We'll sort of play that by ear. But Austin, if there's anything else you wanted to say real quick before we wrap things up.
No.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions about our show, you want to email us, give us some feedback. Our email is strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our episodes on SoundCloud and YouTube at the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast. We are on Twitter and Facebook with the handles STS Podcast 1. We appreciate all the follows, subscriptions, likes, shares, whatever you have to offer, or any feedback. We definitely appreciate it, and we thank you all for joining us today. Austin, you have a fantastic night. Go Steelers. Thank you for joining us today.